Hey there, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. And I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. The EduData podcast is your no-fluff guide to the data driving higher education. Forget about data silos and disconnected stacks. Timothy Davis and Jamie Boggs, two of Element 451's data analysis experts, bring you straight into the heart of the numbers that matter. With sharp commentary and rigorous research, our hosts break down complex data points and actionable insights you can use. Whether you're an administrator, educator, or just a higher ed enthusiast, EduData is your key to unlocking the data behind academia. New episodes drop every Friday morning, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search the EduData podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell, Community Engagement Lead at Pathify. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a proud member of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow every day. Explore all of our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome back, everybody, for an exciting episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. My guest today is somebody that I've bumped into at a few events over this past year. We've had some really awesome conversations about sort of just student success, engaging students and really meaningful, thoughtful initiatives to kind of build their learning, help students help each other to learn and grow. And just really appreciate Joseph's approach to this. He, comes from sort of a faculty background, academic background, bringing really, I think, just a lot of kind of weight and credibility to approaches in student success that, there's a lot of ideas around, how to approach this kind of work, but just really appreciate his kind of thoughtfulness and everything. So really excited to have him on the show here to talk more about it and to share all of his insights out with the audience here. But we'll start as we always do. If you want to introduce yourself to everybody, kind of just briefly give an overview of your professional background, and then we'll get into talking about kind of your specific program initiative that you've created at your institution.
Dustin, thank you so much. It's really great to have another conversation with you, frankly. I'm Joseph Orgel. I have a PhD in the biological sciences. The fact that I have a PhD in the biological sciences is almost an education miracle, but I'll get back to that in a moment. My current role, I am a professor of biology, originally joining the Illinois Institute of Technology as an assistant professor of biological, chemical, and physical sciences. I am now courtesy appointment, biomedical engineering, and an affiliate professor at Stewart School of Business. And I have an administrative portfolio of academic affairs. So what that actually means is, at the moment, 8,500, possibly soon to be 10,000 full-time students at Illinois Tech. I myself am charged with, through the offices that I run, with the academic success of all of them, and also the coordination of about 300 academic programs.
Yeah, and I guess there's like a brief follow-up to sort of the wide-reaching kind of array of things that you're involved with. Do you feel like that sort of exposure that you have as we kind of lead into explaining this empowerment, leadership, and mentorship program that you sort of helped inaugurate at Illinois Tech, do you feel like that kind of broad exposure that you've had, was that a precursor to sort of informing your perspective to develop this, or was it sort of a byproduct of as you sort of immerse yourself in something like this, it kind of created more opportunities, I guess, to get more involved sort of in different areas of the institution?
Yes, and also no, but also in a similar kind of sense that I have spent my entire life preparing for this conversation. There's no way that my experiences didn't inform it. So I suppose, yes, it had some direct significance to how I did it, but it didn't make me want to do it. I already wanted to have that kind of approach. And the experiences at the institution I'm in currently informed me on how to do it. But then again, It's because I was trying to apply it in the institution I'm in as well. So I did pay very careful attention to the needs of the particular institution, and I didn't assume that one size fits all.
Yeah, and I think why I ask that is I think sometimes it's like funny where people kind of like stumble into these sort of things, and it's like, the idea is like, oh, well, I never really intended to like do something like this or whatever, and like if I think that sometimes it can be fine, but there's also like a shallowness or a hollowness to it, because it's just like you feel as though you're like the first one to ever think about this, or like, oh, like why hasn't anybody ever done anything like this before? Like there's sort of this like aloofness or whatever. Because I guess I say all of that to sort of reinforce again just the very, I think, thoughtful and thorough way that you've gone about this, and also to try to like kind of capture the essence and capture the magic and try to like share it out through like kind of the research. And so before we get too far, can you just briefly explain what this empowerment, leadership, and mentorship, or ELM program is? And then we'll start to kind of like delve deeper into kind of the approach and its impacts.
Yes. So I will directly keep your question in mind. The precursor to it is why I launched it at Illinois Tech in the way that I did. I realized a long time ago that the thing I love most about teaching is not really instruction, it's mentorship. And part of the national development of that, of realizing that mentorship is a key tool of instruction and advising and teaching one another to be the people that we want to be together in the kind of cohort that we want to be. So when I kind of stumbled into academic administration, I was given a specific charge to improve student success. Actually, the original title was Deputy Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives. And really that was to be an internal consultancy, a change manager. And I was asked at the last minute to take on the additional title and student success. And so I took that on, and I'm looking at an institution that is venerable. It is brilliant in its service and in its delivery. Not so great with the actual student success part. That's in the past because that changed dramatically. And I realized the single most important thing is not the tools as such. It is not just the analytics or the persistent statistics. It's ensuring that the students, the people that we are mentoring, feel empowered. And wouldn't it be great if they also empowered each other? Wouldn't it be great if they empowered everyone? And so that was the genesis to that. So what it is both a platform for the instruction and building of durable skills that are practiced in rational, empathetic communication and building emotional intelligence, linking to metacognition, tools and practices that leads to improved academic performance and ultimately better professional placement.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify one thing is I feel like this is like one of these like people have a lot of like hot takes on and everything, like that terminology of like durable skills, because I think that's like the evolution of like soft skills and everything, and that's the idea that I think there's a lot of like consternation about it is like we're recognizing that is, given obviously your maybe preferred choice of words, like they are durable throughout, like whatever you do in your career, in work and out of work, and just like it can help us to be better humans. And even just what you're kind of saying, like, people helping people kind of thing, like really keeping that sort of human element with the mentorship and so many parts of this program as a lot of what I appreciated about it. But I guess just to zero in on that one part, I guess, like, was it a very thoughtful choice? I assume it was, for like using the idea of like durable skills to kind of evolve from like soft skills and that sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the keys to communication is listening to the other person. That is development from listening, not just to exactly what the students and colleagues say, but how they talk about it and how they use those words. And soft skills, there tends to be confusion, and you watch the faces, people, even as they're saying soft skills, there's that little hollowness that suggests not really owning the term yet. And frankly, soft skills, I believe, was well intended when the phrase was developed, and kind of meaning intangible, difficult to pin down as to exactly why, or maybe it's the same kind of oddity of hard science versus soft science. It's like, really, seems to me we all have fairly similar neurology and we're all thinking, and the thinking organ is the primary organ we're using in each of these disciplines. So it's partly because of the soft skills paradox in terminology. Durable skills transfer. They are transferable skills. And by definition, human beings build expertise in particular disciplines because they are transferring their experiences and their skills from elsewhere and from earlier in life. And those skills that become really facilitative in supporting those transitions and building expertise, they're durable. So hence why I has landed on durable skills. But yes, they overlap so much. Soft skills, transferable skills, durable skills, whatever token we're using in a conversation where we've established common vocabulary, fine. But for this moment in time, yes, I am running with durable skills.
Yeah, I do think I like that one. I feel like if people have like habitually listened to episodes of the show throughout like all the years, I think it's always kind of like come to the top of like, I feel like we needed a better name. And then like somebody kind of comes up to the name like, oh yeah, that's pretty good or whatever. But durable does, I think it gives kind of the respect to them. It gives sort of the importance to them. And that sort of, that they're sort of adaptive and flexible and like they can endure any context and, they're durable through time. Like if you have a good bedrock of them, they can sort of really take you pretty far and everything. But yeah, I think that idea of recognizing that, I guess that outcome in and of itself to kind of move towards that part of our conversation, like that is a valuable outcome in and of itself. Like that is something that, certainly, okay, you're going to have your classes. They're going to teach you a lot of those, I'll use air quotes here, like hard skills or whatever, like concepts you need to know, like terminology and, maybe the policy or the sort of whatever, the law of your field, those sort of things. And then it's like, okay, outside of the classroom, typically you're cultivating more of those durable skills. You came up with a way to try to do that. Like that could just be sort of good on its own. But I think you're taking it even further, which is amazing. So the idea of, more of the kind of results that you're seeing in sort of the student success front or other things, like, can you just talk more about that? Because I think, we've got that one piece of the puzzle. The durable skills is something that you're cultivating through like the mentorship and everything. But through this ELM program, what are the other kind of results that you've seen so far?
So quantitative and qualitative discussion, I think those are in those kind of frameworks of what those terms tend to mean to us. Qualitatively, student success is definitely improved using the lens of a student is probably successful if they feel that they are, and they have a rational explanation to back up that feeling. That tends to come, and by the way, we've done substantial work to come with that particular definition and term of student success. It was not just something I picked out as a cloud, but was the result of surveys and think tanks. And you get what I mean. Groups of people thinking together. But in terms of qualitative data, since the inception of the program, the 6-year graduation rate of the whole institution has improved by between 4 and 6%. And it was extremely good before. It was 71, 72%, and it's now hovering between 74 and 77. And that is a transformative difference. In terms of actually something that's at least as important, when you have these averages of statistics, they tend to compress things by too many dimensions into just a singular point, which has significance, but it doesn't give you a picture of what's going on. And you need to look at individual cohorts and groups of people, and you need context as to what's going on. So if we're looking at areas where students are introduced to their core curriculum grades, and this is the differential between the hard and the soft. The so-called hard, so we mean math and computer studies, as a for instance, those have gone up a similar kind of amount. If we look at students who are Pell eligible, and there's lots of needed inside information as to what Pell eligible means, and it's usually code for people who have a background of less than opportune circumstance. That's so politically correct. I discuss myself a little bit by saying that. But they are equalized. And I don't just mean made equitable, equalized. So over the last 3 years, we've seen the average semester GPA of those students go from about 2.2 to better than the average at the school, going above a 3.0. And GPA averages do vary by school and vary by the admission context as well. So if you're at a school where your average is 4.0, that's an interesting other discussion to have. But the most of the students that we have are 3.0 or above. And that is a very good grade for an extremely difficult set of courses and programs at Illinois Tech. We do not inflate our GPA.
It's a good acknowledgement there, because I'm sure that might be like on some people's minds, like, oh yeah, sure, big whoop, whatever. But it's a discussion for another day, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really, again, powerful, sort of like the thoroughness of how you can kind of show your work here. Because I think, again, it could just be like, hey, we're helping to build durable skills and, calling it a day. But like the idea that like, if there's ever any sort of like particular audience that was sort of like critical or whatever, it's like, hey, well, like they're getting better grades, like that's good. On a course by course basis, you could sort of say like, okay, their grades are improving overall, better GPA, and then like, graduation rates and that sort of things. It could be like, oh, well, great, well, they're doing better in that course, but like they're still struggling. Like it's too sort of like niche or something, it only helps them in this one area. Like it doesn't help them, in any other areas, but it's like they're graduating, like we're seeing an increase there. And then that qualitative piece, I think, is really compelling to me. And this, I guess, will just be kind of a brief follow-up before I move on. But like that idea of like, well, student success, a big chunk of it has to be the student feels like they're being successful. It has to be that sort of like, to me, sort of the like, kind of almost like self-esteem or sort of like self-efficacy, like the confidence, because it could be that idea of like, well, I'm doing all these things, but like, am I doing it the right way? Or not? Like you can just, I think, especially in that formative stage, and certainly, being a student is maybe the right time to kind of go through all this sort of like soul searching or whatever. But like that idea of knowing what you're doing is you're doing well, you're doing enough, you figured out what success means to you, and you're achieving that. Like that's so important, again, as sort of kind of like a durable skill, is sort of like being able to kind of get that sense of like internal validation and that sort of thing. So like, I guess I'll sort of set this up to call out something else I want to ask. Like, was that like a surprising sort of finding, or was that like a target you were aiming for, of trying to help? Because you're saying that you're really kind of putting some heads together of like, what does student success truly mean, or what does it mean to a student? So like, was that kind of surprising, I guess, where you kind of ended up, or what the result that you found?
Yeah, I will admit something. I think the chances of future PhD students seeing this are sufficiently low that I'm willing to give away some of the secret sauce. I tend to rough out experiments to get an idea of what is to come before I subject a student to a major life transforming commitment. So I tend to figure out if something that I'm asking is work, quote unquote, is not a good term for it. Give tangible results that gives you feedback for your efforts. Good enough. I don't have to try and do somebody's PhD for them before they do it, but I will actually try some things to make sure that they get some confidence, right? And then develop the durability to continue. So I already had that hands-on experience developed before I started this program. I didn't tell my teaching assistants for one arm of the program, which is an adapted learning class, which grew from 10 students 4 years ago. It's now 160 students every semester. And it's voluntary as well. That's not just students who are forced into those classes. We are familiar with both the imposter syndrome, which is part of what's underlying what you were talking about. And we're also familiar with something that won't immediately seem like it belongs here, but we've heard of the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is usually used in the context of being a bad thing. It's not what you want when you're trying to have a neutral control to an experiment, but it's actually a feature. It's not a bug. And that is, it is a representation of the fact that the person, the subject in question who is receiving treatment or is receiving something beneficial, their embracement of the treatment or something beneficial greatly improves the outcome to an extent that we can measure how much it improves the outcome, even if it doesn't actually have anything in it. So knowing that we could get maybe a 20% boost just by helping students believe in themselves, that is amazing. It's like trying to escape the gravity well of the planet. You've got massive boosters to get you a great deal of the way. That's an amazing, massive boost to that process. And it becomes stronger and it becomes reinforced the more their peers feel that. And it absolutely helps them deal with the imposter syndrome. And another way to deal with the imposter syndrome is to have people around you who you trust to give you objective feedback, but who will be kind.
That's a pretty big thing. But yeah, even that idea, I guess what I'm hearing is like, that willingness to sort of accept help or sort of the opportunity to say like, oh, I'm, opting into this experience. I'm choosing to put myself in an environment or such a situation to kind of try to improve my academic skills or whatever. Like, I'm sure there's a lot more in detail, I guess, and just for the sake of time, I'll try to avoid going down that wormhole. But like that idea, yeah, of just recognizing that as like a very powerful thing of like, you want to, present it in a way that it feels sort of like welcoming and safe for people to opt in, make that choice. It's not a requirement, and to kind of be in an environment where, everybody's going to make that similar choice and they can just kind of go through it together, like saying like, hey, we're kind of all at the same point. We're all trying to strive towards, building our durable skills and those sort of things. Because I think it's, that idea, like part of it comes from like with an imposter syndrome of like assuming everyone else has like figured it out or whatever. So like, I'm sure that's like a big part of it is just being like in a space where it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of normalized and we're all kind of figuring it out together and being supportive and giving feedback of like, hey, have you ever tried this? And like knowing that it's kind of coming from like an earnest, helpful place. So yeah, and I'll just make it clear to folks too, like the work that you've done is like available to kind of go into all the kind of nuts and bolts and data and stuff like that. So we'll make sure to include that in the show notes here. But we've kind of given this kind of brief overview of kind of what you've built, kind of the genesis of it, the impact that it's having to really build up students' confidence and their feeling as though they're being successful, and the improved grades and improved graduation rates and everything. Where does this work go from here? I mean, like, is it just sort of expanding it at your institution? Is there any sort of like iterating, I guess, like kind of from what you've learned to try to keep making it better? But yeah, where does it go from here?
I'd very much like other people to take it up. Part of the reason why I'm in academia is I do believe primary success of the human race is fundamentally down to trust and down to helping one another. And academia is one of those good expressions of it. On its better or average days. On its worst days, you can't really say the same of any discipline. Where does it go from here? We've already engaged an agreement with the Education Department of the City of Chicago, and more specifically, the City Colleges of Chicago and Chicago Public Schools, part of the Education Department, to integrate this methodology in mentorship into a really old approach called Runway 606. So much like that rocket boost analogy, it's supposed to build pathways which eventually become highways in education. And in too short of a summary, that means rising juniors in secondary school gain access to an ecosystem of support and those pathways and those highways that enables them, if they want, to graduate high school with both a high school diploma and their associate's degree, which then feeds into credits for a bachelor's degree, which feeds into credits for a master's degree, and the assistance in professional placement that comes with the internship process of that as well. So that is a considerable commitment that we've made with each other, and scaling up to all of the subjects that we can offer. So for instance, in cybersecurity alone, I believe off the top of my head, we've got 8 different credentials in higher education that become available that way. In addition, I believe that the major source of success in this is the fact that students help each other. This is not new. We know this. And in fact, it follows from what I've just said about humans helping each other. So part of the genesis of ELM was this idea of how about we let them? And not just let them, how about we supercharge them? And also, how about we teach them upfront what is acceptable in higher education and professional practices about how you show your ability, i.e., don't cheat, know, and excel. Don't cheat, know, and excel. And really, that isn't a mantra. I'm just repeating it to make it clear what I said. But the idea of empowerment of oneself and empowerment of others does mean knowing yourself, knowing what your limitations are. Knowing what your limitations are so that you don't practice outside of your competency, so you don't work yourself into an early grave, but also so you know where you can expand your abilities rather than trying to take inappropriate and malformed shortcuts, as well. And then the last bit I'll tip onto that. One of the other things that informed my choice of durable skills was a discovery, and this did come as a surprise, a very pleasant surprise. After that particular course that I just mentioned in adaptive learning, the GPA rose in the semester for all of the other classes, not just this class, by approximately half a letter grade on average. And then it kept getting higher after the class. In the semesters after the class, we tracked the cohorts and they kept improving the GPA. Hence the choice of durable skills, because obviously something happened that was durable from semester to semester, and it made a change.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll definitely sort of bold and circle and underline, a sort of a final thought from my perspective is that idea that students just naturally gravitate towards each other, want to help each other, all these sort of things. So why not try to supercharge them, like you said? But it's just the idea, peer mentorship is so powerful. So I think it's trying to kind of you're never going to kind of box everything in completely, to have nothing happen outside of it or whatever, control all these sort of interactions. But I think if you just generally create a culture where you are encouraging that as often as possible of sort of supporting a peer mentor to reach out and support students. Cause I think it's that idea of if you sort of just assume it'll happen a lot and just sort of go completely hands off. It's well, some people are just more or less willing to ask for help and other people are more or less willing to give help or give the right help or be, those sort of things. So I think just that is kind of a core part of it is this is not sort of a radical sort of out there new idea. It's really trying to earnestly invest in and organize and structure and sort of facilitate more of, I think, what a lot of people would acknowledge are really impactful sort of peer and social relationships for students and everything. So I think that's just a really powerful call out, is just trying to not reinvent the wheel and try to the fact that you are sort of generous enough and, kind of getting this outside of the ivory tower in a sense of just sharing it out with people who are interested to kind of give a structure. Cause I think it could feel very daunting to try to start an undertaking like this, but I think you're helping to hopefully kind of grease the wheels a little bit here and get people moving. So I do really appreciate that. And I'll give you the last word, any sort of final thought, call to action, bit of advice that you want to give to your higher ed colleagues out there who are listening.
Thank you. One of the major reasons why civilization has been successful thus far has been the fundamental basis of Artesian society, where skilled professionals teach the not yet skilled professionals. And as that scales up, that tends to mean that slightly less inexperienced aspirants are teaching the less experienced aspirants, and you have a train-the-trainer model. The last 200 to 300 years of higher education has been fueled a lot by the Industrial Revolution boom and an abrogation in that methodology, where we have not been training the trainer. And instead, we've had an industrial, everybody's the same scale-up approach to education as well. If you're trying to teach 1,000 students math, you need 1,000, sometimes closely related, ways of teaching math. Everybody must be treated a little bit differently. So that's one thing. The second thing is culture is key, and setting a culture is key. Not trying to artificially change it to what you think you want, especially if you come in as a new leader in an institution. Assuming that you can do that is very ambitious at best, and it might be possible. In fact, it is possible, but it isn't just by saying it and repeating it and using good marketing and nice slogans. It does mean by building relationships and talking to people. And it's the same with education and knowing who you're talking to as a class and knowing who the people who are in the needful situation, who they are, where they're coming from, and what they need. And one of the most accessible ways to do that is, frankly, to use near-peer mentors. To do that well and with acuity and efficacy, that means having a train-the-trainer model where you have the expert who is in some ways, not just by age, but by culture and experience and environment, and increasingly by vocabulary, as we see vocabulary and idiolect drift amongst much younger individuals across the world. If you're using the train-the-trainer model approach, then that bridges generations and cultures and gaps effectively and much more smoothly. And it shouldn't be ironic, but it builds a better, diverse culture that way too.
Yeah, I mean, powerful stuff, important stuff. And I think really this is what I think this moment for higher ed kind of calls for. Like, it just makes me think, like, it just had this kind of pop in my head that I feel like this is part of kind of the equation of just like, I think that higher ed moving forward is just going to get increasingly personalized. You know, that idea that you can have those sort of near-peer relationships and maybe tutors and faculty or just other like sort of digital experience and tools will kind of create a sort of an ecosystem and experience that's more tailored and catered to you as the individual student, grounded in just sort of the fundamentals of the institution and things. But so I think that's just kind of what popped in my head. And I think it's definitely, just really crucial and critical and relevant work that you're doing that I hope other folks are inspired by and inspired to reach out to you to keep the conversation going and check out the work that you've done. We'll link to in the description of this episode. So just appreciate you so much for chatting with me at the events that we bumped into each other. I've always had good conversations, and for being willing to hop on the podcast to share it out with the community here. And just really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Right back at you. Thank you for the good work that you put in. Keep at it, sir. It's a crucial service.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.